Hi everyone, it's Nicole Spohr and welcome back to my channel. Today I have some masking and butterfly stenciled cards to share with you using some favorite newer Simon Says stamps, dies, and stencils. We're going to be combining some masking stencils with a butterfly stencil, some new butterfly stamps and dies, and then some previously released sentiments from a couple of favorite greeting stamp sets. We're going to start with the Butterfly Love stencil, and we're going to tape it in place with a little post-it tape to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panel of smooth white cardstock. For this first color combination, I'm going to be mixing some favorite Simon Says stamp inks to create my butterfly background. So we're going to stencil the butterfly background first, then the masking stencil, so that we can avoid having any harsh lines go through the butterflies. I am using Simon Says stamp die inks in the colors Willow, Spring Rain, High Dive, that's the color I'm getting ready to apply right here, and then we're going to finish with a little Blue Jay. So all greens and aquas and blues for this first background. One of the things I love about dye inks is often they will go on somewhat blotchy, but as the ink dries, they're going to smooth out really nicely. As long as you kind of make sure and overlap those colors a bit when you're inking, there's going to be a beautiful seamless blend between those colors, and it just adds some interest to do them in different colors, I think, rather than just one. This is a great way to incorporate more color into what is a pretty simple design. Next, we're going to take the second largest stencil from the Simon Says stamp, A2 Masks Stencils. There's 3 new masking stencil sets and relatively new. There's the A2 stencils that I'm using here, made for A2 size cards. There's A7 stencils for the larger size card, and there's slimline stencils. And these are fantastic for just giving you the illusion of a layer without actually having a layer. I'm using that same Spring Rain ink that I used as the second color from left on the Butterfly Love heart, and just going around the areas where it doesn't overlap the heart. So up high on this one, and then those 2 bottom corners. Just very lightly, I'm using a super light hand. I'm not re-inking my blender brush a ton. When I remove this stencil, you're going to see that we're left with this beautiful layered result that is so easy to achieve, and I absolutely love it because we instantly look like we have 2 layers and this entire background is flat. Next, I'm going to take this XL greeting, and I'm going to try to figure out where I want to place that on my background. I will also take this detailer eraser. It is battery operated. I saw that I got a little ink smudge there in the bottom left corner of my panel, and I'm going to work to try to erase that a little bit. Just a great little way to clean up smudges here and there on a project. And I did take my time kind of trying to get that ink smudge. It was on my finger and I didn't notice it when I went to pull up the tape. Okay, once we have that, I want to take the Hello Greeting from one of my favorite sentiment stamp sets called XL Greetings. They're all large size greetings, but this Hello is my favorite. And we're going to stamp that in the center. I thought I would shift it off to the right a little bit to center it with the heart, but I didn't like how that looked. So we're going to center it with the A2 masking stencil up near the top of the design. We're going to stamp that with clear embossing ink twice. And the reason I did this twice was I just wanted to make sure the coverage was really good, as this is a large sentiment. And we're going to heat emboss this then with the Simon Says stamp Antique Gold Embossing Powder. My embossing powder will switch from card to card. I did create 3 cards very similar. They all just feature a different color combination. But I went with my gut with what I felt looked the best. And I think silver or gold would have worked with this one, but I did go with antique gold. For the purple blue background, I am going to go with silver. And then for the reds and orange and yellows background, we're going to go back to antique gold. And I'll show you those 2 examples in a minute. I did create my first card from start to finish, and I had all my supplies still out on my desk, and I thought it would be fun to try it with some different color combinations, and that's kind of how the 3 cards came about, just because I thought it would be kind of neat to see how the card changed from color combination to color combination. Next, we're going to stamp a Tiny Words encouragement phrase from the Tiny Words encouragement stamp set on some smooth white cardstock. I stamped this with the Blue Jay ink, the dark blue ink that I used for this card. And then we're going to die cut this panel with the Sentiment Labels Simon Says stamp die. And I also thought, let's add some additional butterflies. So there is another stamp set that was released with that Butterfly Love stencil, and it's called Butterfly Kisses. There are coordinating dies that work with this. And so I decided to do some tone-on-tone butterflies that could be floating and dimensional on this 1-layer background. I'm stamping the solid butterfly with Spring Rain ink, and then I'm just inking up the edges, both the top and bottom of this butterfly, with High Dive ink and stamping it again. Using a MISTI or a stamp positioner of some sort is critical for this, for the perfect line up of those of the stamped image, but I love the two-tone of this, and I love how the tips of the wings are all dark. We're going to go ahead and die cut these at the same time. Remember, this was my first card, and so there's a little bit more, I want to call it trial and error. You'll notice that I originally thought I'd stamp this phrase on my card background, but I did not like how it looked. I think it really got lost in the design. You can see it there. And we're just going to cover it up with the sentiment label. But it was a learning type of, I hate to call it a mistake, but kind of one of those learning steps in the card project where I knew what not to do for the remaining 2 cards. So after I have die cut one side, I like to flip it around and die cut the other. As I am trying to consider and ponder how many more butterflies I want to add to this, I knew I wanted to use the small butterflies from the Butterfly Kisses set. And so those are going to be kind of floating up from the tail of the letter O. And again, we're going to do some ombre stamping with these. So stamping it with the Spring Rain ink a couple of times first to darken and make sure I get good coverage. And then we're going to take High Dive ink again and just ink up some of those bottom butterflies so that they kind of go from darker to lighter up in that upper right corner. Now this is going to make the top of the card kind of top heavy, if you will, even though we're going to add those dimensional butterflies throughout. I'm ultimately going to decide that we need some more of those little butterflies coming down from the other side. Just gives the card a nicer flow, and you'll see that here in a little bit. Let's go ahead and stamp the remaining 2 butterfly images from Butterfly Kisses. So in this stamp set, you actually get a heart with butterflies that's really similar to the stencil, but just a little bit smaller scale. A heart, some sentiments, and then the 3 butterfly images, I guess I should say, and then the 4th is that little cluster of small butterflies I just stamped on the background. I ended up using all of these individual butterflies. I created an ombre effect with this one as well. That's the High Dive and Blue Jay inks. And I did go ahead and die cut this one because originally I started just with these 2, and I am going to stamp the smallest one as well. So even though the first butterfly was solid, you can see how that great kind of rock and roll technique is what it's actually called when you add some additional color to an image, so it's two-tone like this. But you can see how it works for more of an outline image as well. I decided to take some black pens and draw in the antennae for the butterflies, and then I'm going to take a black glaze pen and do the bodies. This little step actually ended up being probably one of my favorite things about these cards, as it adds so much interest to the butterfly themselves. And then just want to let that dry before we touch it. And I'm going to do that on this more solid butterfly as well. And then I only used the glaze pen for the heads and bodies, and then I used a black multi-liner pen for the antennae. Behind the wings on the butterflies, then we're going to add some foam adhesive squares. We're adding foam adhesive back behind our sentiment strip. Just going to peel off the backing paper there. I like to use tweezers to adhere these in place, and I want to fully cover up where I stamped my sentiment, so I'm being pretty aware of that. And it's so much easier to read when it's not stamped over those ink colors. We're going to put 4 small foam adhesive squares behind the wings on the butterfly, and then liquid adhesive behind the body. And I'm going to show you how I like to attach these to my card so that the body is attached to the card and the wings are popped up. This gives them the illusion of flying, which I really love. So I like to take tweezers then and just kind of hold or pinch that body down flat to the card while the liquid glue dries. Foam adhesive back behind the wings on the solid butterfly. And then we're just going to have that one floating. They're not lined up perfectly with the silhouetted butterflies from the Butterfly Love stencil, but kind of offset a little bit. They're not the exact same butterfly, and I didn't want it to appear that way. I just wanted it to kind of be a nice layer. Let's do our last little butterfly. We're going to combine Spring Rain and Blue Jay for this one, starting with Spring Rain first, and then tapping on that Blue Jay ink for the bottom, and just filling it in until I make sure that I get the blend that I want. And it looked like I was missing an area that I didn't. And that looks much better. We'll die cut this guy and then add him to the card as well. I want to make sure and add that black pen detail. It really adds so much. Here in a minute when I stamp the 6 individual butterflies for the remaining 2 cards, I think it really shows the difference when you see all of them flat and then going from flat to having that black butterfly body. It just really adds a nice, very easy touch to the card. Here's where you really can kind of see how top heavy the design is, and it just needed a little something. So that's where I'm going to add in some additional little butterfly cluster. Again, Spring Rain first. That's that light color used for the masking stencil and the lightest aqua color used throughout the design. And then High Dive will be tapped around the edges of some of these butterflies and stamped over. And I got a little too heavy with that, so I wiped a little bit away. And then I can add a little bit more. And again, as this ink dries, it's dye ink, it's going to smooth out quite a bit. We'll add that remaining butterfly to our stenciled background. Just kind of pinch that down so it dries. Let's go ahead and stencil our other 2 backgrounds, starting with the pink, red, orange, and yellow. This is some Twirling TUTU Simon Says stamp ink. Next, we're going to have Watermelon, which is one of my favorites as far as a red ink. It's kind of a pinky red, just really pretty. And I'm tapping off some of that ink so it's not quite as heavy of a hand as I initially start blending into the Twirling Tutu. Then we're going to move on to Clementine, which is one of my favorite orange colors. And we want to make sure the orange blends into the red really nicely. So we'll start kind of applying that diagonal strip or whatever you want to call it of the color, but pulling the color up into watermelon as I get more and more blending. And then finally, we're going to finish with Duckling, which is another favorite. This is one of my all-time favorite yellows. I just really, really love this yellow color. This is a very summery type of color combination, I think. It's one of my favorites for summer-themed projects. We're going to pull off that stencil, and I'm going to use the larger A2 stencil. So this is the largest stencil in that collection. There are 4, so there's 2 smaller than the ones I'm using today. This is going to be a larger rectangle, leaving a little bit less white border all the way around. I just wanted to give a couple of different examples. And then again, we're very lightly going to ink the edges that don't overlap the heart. So using a little bit of that Duckling ink to apply the color around my edges. Concentrating the ink around the edge of the stencil and then towards the center, very, very, very light. Go up here around the top. We just want that nice illusion of a matted rectangle. And when I pull the stencil mask away, look how pretty that is. I love this color combination. I also shifted the Butterfly Love stencil up on that one just for a little bit different look. Then we're going to do another heart down near the bottom, back to that original A2 masking stencil for our last card. We're just going to shift our heart over to the left instead of the right for this one. And I decided to do a color combination where I'm pulling in some of that Twirling Tutu, which a lot of it does get blended out, but it does have a nice little light side to it over here. But I applied that one first, and then I'm going to do something a little different where I went and did Blue Jay, which again, that I used Blue Jay on the first card, Twirling Tutu on the Summertime background, and Blue Jay on the aqua blue one. But we're going to do that in the opposite side. And in between, we're going to use Hot Mama and Deep Purple Simon Says Stamp inks. And we're really going to blend so that these blend out into the blue and into the pink for a beautiful seamless design. I have mentioned before in videos that purple is one that often will give me some trouble. I really love, I do want to preface it with, I love how this turned out, but I wasn't sure. I almost thought about scrapping this one just because it was a little bit more work. But what's funny is I should always take my own advice and remember that as dye inks dry, they absorb into the cardstock and they will even and smooth out and even fade just a little bit, where they look so much nicer than when you first put them on. About this point, I just really wasn't sure that I wanted to save this one, but I'm so, so glad that I did. Then again, as I mentioned a second ago, we're going to go back to our A2 stencil and place that around here. And then go ahead and stencil the edges with the Hot Mama, I love that name, Simon Says Stamp ink. We just want to use a nice light hand to give the illusion of that rectangle all the way around. I'm using a microfiber cloth to clean off some of that dark or deep purple color from my blender brush before I go back to the Hot Mama color. Because I use my blender brushes kind of one per color family, Hot Mama is a little bit lighter than deep purple, so I wanted to get any of that excess ink that might be on top of the blender brush and remove it. This project, at this point, I'm doing it very much assembly line style. So because I did that first card from start to finish and I love the design, I'm going to go ahead and stamp all of the rest of the pieces just like before, but you're going to see them stamped a little bit quicker. For example, that's some Duckling ink, and then we're going to do Clementine on the tops of the wings, but we're going to stamp all of our butterflies this way, just like we did before, where we're mixing and matching the colors so that they're two-tone. The solid pink butterfly is Twirling Tutu and Watermelon. And then we're going to go back to the big butterfly that will be for the purple blue card. That's going to be Twirling Tutu and I think maybe some deep purple. No, I bet that's Hot Mama. And then the blue jay for the solid blue, and we're going to ink the edges with deep purple for this one. For the blue purple butterfly. For the smallest butterfly then, for the summertime background, that's going to be Clementine and Clementine and Watermelon. And then for the purple card, that's going to be Hot Mama and Deep Purple. So I've stamped all of my butterflies and I can die cut them all at once. One other difference between this and the first card, I am using hello on the remaining two cards from the XL greetings, but I am going to use two different phrases from the Tiny Words Encouragement. There's so many great sentiments in here that I thought would work with hello, so I just mixed and matched it. So for the first card, it was hello, sending thoughts and smiles your way. Then I'm going to have hello, have a great day, and hello, hoping today brings you happiness. All just more of the encouragement type of card design. Here is the silver embossing powder on the purple background. I just like the silver with the purple. I thought a little better than antique gold. And then back to antique gold for this one. And of course, we're going to need to move our placement down to the bottom rather than the top, since we stenciled our heart up there, and I need to fill in some of this area down near the bottom of the design. Placement for things is just a little different in that we're switching, kind of flip-flopping where the butterfly clusters and things go in relation, and the sentiments in relation to the rest of the design. So stamping all of those little butterfly clusters again. That's some Duckling and Clementine, and then we'll do the same up at the top. Actually, I think I did Clementine and Watermelon up at the top. A little bit different. But I love those little trails of teeny tiny butterflies for adding some interest to the design. And no other stamp set is required. I love that. I love when we can get multiple different elements for a card from one set. Then the Hot Mama in Deep Purple up at the top. I think we'll do a little Hot Mama and Blue Jay down near the bottom. We'll go ahead and put our foam adhesive back behind our sentiment strips and pop those in place. I did all of my die cutting. You can see my little stack there, and I have not added the black to the bodies of the butterflies yet. In fact, I went ahead and attached one of the butterflies and instantly was like, oh no, because we definitely want to add that, as it is something that I feel like adds so much to the design. So I put this guy down and I was like, oh, yep, I need my black pins. So we're just going to very carefully go in and draw that in and let that dry. And I'm going to grab the rest of my butterflies and do all of those really quick. Just tracing in the antennae with my fine tip pen. And then we'll use the Jelly Roll Glaze pen for the body. And let all of those dry and then attach those to our card background. Other than that, I am simply going to attach all of these to white top fold card bases, and that will finish up our card design. I hope this has inspired you to try out some masking stencils and also maybe just some fun stenciling techniques and inking techniques with all of your favorite ink colors. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this masking stencil and butterfly stencil tutorial. The supplies I use to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here is another video featuring Simon Says stamp products that you might be interested in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell to never miss a new card making video. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.